that negative aspect, which was so fantastically highlighted by Edward Said, of the Orientalist discourse as a discourse which is mostly concerned with a certain control, manipulation, domination of the other. So in some sense in Brazil, both in intellectual circles and universities did not inherit to a certain extent or produced a discourse about India that could call it within the frame of the Orientalist discourse, or perhaps in the Indological context in a broader sense of the term. Latin American hosts, and Brazil particularly hosts in São Paulo, the first Department of Sanskrit Studies, which is inaugurated in the middle 60s by 1968 around, which was a lively department in terms of production of not only undergraduates, but postgraduates, MPhils, PhD. But nowadays it has been waning in some sense, their interest, and it became just a subject within the general courses, most of the courses of languages, and still conducting PhD research. On the other hand, for the last 8 years, in terms of a systematic study of Indian philosophies, I started in a university close to Rio de Janeiro, a federal university. In Brazil, the university system is all a central government system, a center for the study of Indian religions and philosophies. And it is part of a religious studies program, perhaps the oldest religious studies program in Brazil. And that's where I created this Center for the Study of Indian Religions and Philosophies, where we conduct research on MPhil, PhD, and we have formed several peoples throughout this period of time and published articles and books on this subject. That is my introduction in terms of institutional pertaining. And in some sense, when we think about Indology, the original grasping of the term is that it pertains to a certain perception of the other on Indian society and Indian civilization in general, in all these spheres that have been discussed here throughout these 2 days. In that sense, originally, just like the word Orientalism, we could call it Indianism also, and Indology seems to be a sophistication in terms of this possibility of other terminology like Indianism or Orientalism. It do not make sense to think that an Indian could be an Indologist or an Indian could be an Indianist in that sense, because what was mostly at stake was a perception of the other on India. When we enlarge this perception to include the possibility of admitting, let us say, that perceptions of Indians are also to be framed within the broader perspective of Indological studies, then we are in some sense accepting that not just what we may call a certain epistemological way of doing these studies can be dominant. It means, if I say that Indological studies are originated in a perception of the other on India, then I would have to say that what is dominant there to define this is the fact that a certain way of looking at, a certain gaze, a certain epistemology is also determined and framed by the Western tradition. So when we expand this possibility of understanding Indology, including what we call the native thinkers, then we are necessarily to open up a certain dimension of epistemological understanding. It means that if I understand today Indology, if I understand today the possibility of a discourse about oneself in the context of one in a particular civilizational context speaking of himself, is because he is open up to adopt by his own freedom, after a certain critical assessment, that methodologies and those epistemologies that the West has brought. But most importantly, and also, he has the right to undertake those studies according to the epistemologies and to the methodologies which are prevalent and current throughout the history of that civilization. So it means that, in some sense, what would be an object of study in the Indological origins, which is to study Indian epistemologies as an object, can become the means through which knowledge is also produced in the academia. It means I may claim the right to use epistemologies produced in the Indian civilization to, for example, produce a thesis or a book or some academic discourse which may be worth of being heard and respected academically. So I think in that sense that I would frame myself and my own intervention in the context of the being someone who in South America, in a different marginal context in terms of the world history, tries to speak about Indian civilization. I personally, since I was brought up since practically childhood abroad, I struggle myself sometimes where I posit myself within the side of the we, I mean we the Indians, or of the they who look at the Indians. Sometimes I catch myself speaking as if I am an Indian, and sometimes I catch myself as speaking of the Indians as something else. And I think learning to accept this apparent contradiction is also an important point, because to a certain extent, even within the Indian context, the plurality is so bigger and so great that the idea of otherness is not just a matter which is marked by civilizational differences, but even in the relationship of intersubjective relations, we have to confront with these problems of the other. So I just, since I was asked to be briefed, I will just say that in terms of my personal experience of teaching, some basic premises have been fundamental for me to be able to convey certain meaning about Indian traditions in the context of Brazilian, in the context of the Portuguese language. I'll just list some of them which are relevant for my undertaking of that task. I call this premises of teachings, which are derived from my own experience of teaching Indian philosophies and traditions. I'm not exactly a Sanskritist. My basic background is in philosophy. I studied Sanskrit slightly late, so I belong to that class of scholars which claim to be able to read and translate Sanskrit texts, but is not that trained in speaking in Sanskrit. But I think one of the most important things that I confront in the classroom about transmitting the matters and the issues about Indian civilization is what we may call the world idea of universal history. That's always been a means through which we just frame within a kind of prison-like the understanding of a certain voice which is being produced, evoked in a certain moment of the history of mankind. When we say, and we try to identify, for example, the date and the age and the precise date and age of Shankaracharya, and we identify it in, I don't know, 18th, 8th, 9th century, we do not just mean in the context of the idea of a world history that we are talking about a number. We are talking about a certain insertion in the context of an assumingly, and I talk this a discourse as an unfoldment of what we call the Enlightenment idea of universal history that inserts itself in one moment of the world history. And world history is marked by what we call ancient history, classical history, medieval history, and so on and so forth. So all these categories begin immediately to stick to those determinations of time. There is an important historian, Indian historian called Sanjay Subramaniam, who tries to put in the academic context an alternative to that dominance of a world history. First, to admit the possibility of parallel histories, and he called them connected histories. What we have, and I think to tell the story of Indian civilization, we have to claim the right that there is a history of India which is not to be necessarily framed within the larger understanding of what in the West is called a universal history. Another question which arises in terms of what I call these premises of teaching is the whole pedagogical context in which this teaching takes place. For example, the fundamental question of the oral tradition. Now, when we are dealing with texts by and large, we tend to neglect contemporarily, particularly if you are in a civilizational context where these oral developments are not present or are not lively present as they are elsewhere in India itself, we tend to neglect a certain over-determination of these oral traditions in the Indian civilization. And that does not mean to say, as sometimes the Western linguistics has tried to teach us, that you have on one side oral traditions and we have on the other side written traditions. India has a concomitant and coextensive tradition in writing tradition. But to a certain extent, we have to understand that pedagogical contexts are contexts of orality, and records are records written for the sake of a certain understanding of orality. On the other hand, orality does not just mean to speak, just like a speech is being enacted. Orality means fundamentally dialogue. And I remember here one counter-current philosopher of the West, counter-current to the tendency of philosophy to become more speculative rather than transformative, which is Gadamer, which is a disciple of or a continuator of Heidegger. And he used to say that language, and we speak about language as the foundation of one's being in the world, is fundamentally conversation. That would be translated for the word sanvada in Sanskrit. So it's not just mere language that we are talking about. Vach is not just mere language. Vach is conversation. Vach is dialogue. Therefore, the pedagogical contexts, which include not only what we call the debates, which seemingly seem to aim at defeating or refuting the other's positions, but also the dialogue between masters and disciples, they to a certain extent enact that possibility of language. Language is a collective construction. So there cannot be, as it is the case in Indian philosophical systems as such, a discourse on truth, because truth is a collective construction, be it in a debate where we want or seemingly want to refute the other, whether it is a conversation in the context of a relationship between master and disciple. Another thing important, which I think is a premise of teaching also, and confronts what sometimes we call the sacred text in the West, the Bible, is the idea of, when we speak about Vedas, Upanishads, of a certain openness of the text. That though we have certain fixed canons, to a certain extent, when we speak about Upanishads, we don't speak, as remembering here Shankaracharya rightly says, he's not speaking about specific books or a specific text. He's speaking about knowledge. And if knowledge is what stands for that word, then we have to admit that tradition is a dynamic continuation of insertion, of corrections, of transformations, of modifications, of revisions, of certain textual presentations. And on the other hand, that whatever we call it as tradition of interpretation of texts is also meant to be as plural as the possibility of an open text. So the text functions as a seed for one to understand a certain reality that he himself has to understand. He has to incorporate the text. And the commentaries or the traditions which follow a certain texts necessarily will tend to adapt it to different circumstances of time and space. And therefore, what I call hermeneutical plurality is intrinsic to the idea of a sacred text, which sometimes is something more controversial about the possibility in the West of accepting as truthful or possibly truthful in the sense of leading one to truth, a plurality of discourses. That also brings me to the idea that commentaries are not just explanations or interpretations in the Western sense of the term. And I think in the Buddhist tradition we find a very clear understanding of that possibility with the word abhidharma. When we speak about the word abhidharma, which is usually translated in the Western tradition as a kind of speculations, sometimes of the metaphysics as a discourse comparing to the Western philosophical tradition. In fact, abhidharma has been understood as contextual pedagogies where the words of the Buddha, in the case of the sutras, are incorporated and appropriated. Therefore, is what the other philosopher I mentioned before, Gadamer, speaks about, and a kind of hermeneutical application of the texts. So commentaries, they are not mere interpretations of the texts. They are subjective efforts to appropriate the texts for one's self-transformation. And therefore, that is something that sometimes is quite difficult for us to convey in the classroom. And the last topic, I could say also as a premise of my teaching, is about the authorship. In the Western tradition, with the exception of the Bible, and exception is fundamental, if you accept one text which has no authorship, then I could claim that non-authorship is also a fundamental dimension of all authorship. But in the Western tradition, authorship is a kind of fixation. It's fixation in the West, it's fixation the way other civilizations are looked upon. In the Indian tradition, I remember here J.N. Mohanty, we used to say, what it means a Paurusheya. And he says, okay, we can have a broader discourse about the different traditions and how they treat and how they interpret what it means. But basically it means that the text does not or is not determined by the intentionality of the author. It means I may say that I have written something. Obviously, someone has written it in some time and some space. But does not mean that it is its subjective, egocentric intentionality which determines the text. And therefore, the question of authorship in the Indian tradition is very problematic, because if you introduce that a text necessarily has to be submitted to a certain faithfulness and sincerity and honesty of the author, in fact, you are submitting a discourse of knowledge to the subjectivity of the author or the presumed author of the texts. So when we speak about, that's why in Indian tradition in general, as it was, for instance, in some Western classical and ancient traditions, whenever an author comes, he comes speaking as the other said. And he's going to make the modifications, amendments, innovations which are required to adjust the text and the knowledge for the circumstances of his time and space. But he does not claim this to be his texts. So when we want to determine very clearly datations and precise locations, what we are doing, besides inserting this production in a certain world history, which may be just a dictatorship of understanding what a European history should be, or what European history dictates for the others to be, it may also be a means of implying that there is a subjectivity more involved and more determining the knowledge which is at stake. So I think it's important to preserve the idea of non-authorship in that sense of some discourses which are to a certain extent supervised by tradition. Here sampradayas, shakas are fundamental, because obviously you can have also corruption, people speaking things pretending to be universal and in fact are just subjective egoistic interests. But preserving the idea that knowledges can be collective enterprises and not just individual productions. Thank you very much. That's what I had to say.
नमस्तभायै साध्यक्षायै सभायाम् आसीनेभ्यः विद्वत्तलजेभ्यः सादरं नमस्कारान् व्याहरामि. With regard to the theme of the conference, I think I am a wrong fit in this panel, because I did not do much work in this area, but a kind of interest I have developed. As part of this, I would like to tell something about the least bothered research area that is part of the etymological studies, that is Ayurveda. So when we talk about Ayurveda, I immediately recall a story. The story goes like this. There was a Gurukulam. One of the disciples, so ardent disciples of his Guru, has asked a question. uh, what is the most important thing in Indian philosophy? Guruji said, there's nothing but Atma. You have to study more about Atma Vidya. Okay, he has agreed and has confined to this particular injunction. The other day, he has asked another question. All the time we speak of Atma and Atma Vidya, Atma Jnana only. What about body? Body is not important at all. There is no purpose for this body because this is perishable. What is imperishable is Atma. Guru did not say anything. One fine day, the disciple went to the forest to bring the summits. Some divine miracle happened. As soon as he entered a mango grove, he became a goat. He transformed himself into a goat. And it is actually the dusk time. All of a sudden, a tiger came over there. And it is actually frightening him like anything. It can hop and devour this person anytime. This fellow is shivering in fear, trembled. This episode continued till yesterday morning. As soon as there is a sunrise, immediately he got back his form. And Guru was worried about this boy. He did not come back to his Gurukulam. And he went in search of him. Ultimately found it near the mango grove. Arey, what happened to you? No, I don't know what happened. Suddenly, I transformed to a goat. There was a tiger, and I was almost died. Then Guru told, why are you worried? All the time you had impression that body is perishable. What is imperishable is Atma. Tiger will be eating away only the body, not the Atma. You are there all the time. So that is how Guru has answered this question. But he was also completely satisfied with his personal experience. So this establishes the importance of body. Sharira Madhyankara Dharma Sadhanam has told. That is why Ayurveda deals with this science. Ayurveda and Yoga, these are two of the sister concerns. In this aspect, whenever I look at the translatability of some of the terms used in Ayurveda Shastra, that is Vaidyakiya, what comes to our mind immediately is the definition of health. Swasthyam. Swasthasya bhavaha swasthyam, if it is, then who is a swastha? If this is the question. Samadoshaha, samagnischa, samadhatu malakriyaha, prasanna atma indriya manaha, swastha ityabhidhiyate. This is the definition given by Shishruta and Shishruta Samhita. What is the definition of WHO? Health is a state of complete social, mental well-being, not mere disease or infirmity. Until 1947, they did not realize the importance of including mental health as part of the definition of the health itself. So totally, the functioning of mind is forgotten in modern medical science. All the time, you look at the body, it is a subject for them, whereas for us, it is a holistic approach. This is how the definition differs. What is actually a dosha? There are three doshas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. I am trying to establish a case. That is why I am just giving a kind of theory. It doesn't mean you don't know these things. What is Tridosha? Vata, Pitta and Kapha. Va Gati Gandhano is the dhatu. Vata is translated as wine. Pittati iti pittam. Tapasantapa is the root. Pittam is translated as the bile. And Kapha is actually the phlegm. Kena jalena phalati. If this is the definition, the scope of these terms is much more than what is actually translated. So holistically, when you look at the definition of health itself, the modern bioscience, the modern medical science is measurably failed in translating. This is also the part of Indological translations. Prasanna Atma Indriya Manaha, whenever you translate, in most of the translations have seen that how Atma is actually Nirvikara, etc. Prasanna, it becomes a kind of Prasannata in it. The Chakrapani Datta commentator on Charaka Samhita says that Atma ityasya Shariram ityarthaha. So you are losing complete context within the realm of the definition of the health. When you come to yoga, the yoga that is being practiced is totally different from the textual injunctions and the sutras that the knowledge that offer to us. So in this context, I don't take much time. The less researched area, the less spoken area in part of Indological studies is Ayurveda and yoga. So nowhere in Indian universities, Ayurveda is being taught. Maybe few institutions are there, but as part of the PG curriculum, we have to include this Ayurveda and yoga as part of the PG, MA syllabus. Then only people will be able to derive the knowledge that is there in the Shastra, because Ayurveda is based on the philosophical foundations. Charaka is more towards the Vaiseshika, whereas Sushruta is more towards the Sankhya kind of philosophies. They speak of all the Pramanas. So we are completely deprived of this knowledge because we have never thought of introducing these subjects in our syllabi. When you come to the translations, again, these Indological translations are totally distorting. As just I gave an example, yoga, dharma, guru, these terms cannot be translated so easily because Aishwaryasya samagrasya, Viryasya yashashaha sriyaha, jnana vairagyyoschaiva, shandam bhaga idirana. How can you translate simply this as God? A God should have endowed with all these qualities. So this is how my concern here is translating the non-translatables, as Rajiv Malhotra succinctly puts it. We have to take a special interest in this area also as part of Indological studies. That is so, when you think about what next in Indology, first of all, there are distortions. There are certain communities and scholars who are working in this cause, and they are trying their best to defend what exactly is there in the text, because they never go to the original text. Whereas, I just told, Atma ityasya Shriram ityarthaha, this translation only gives the idea what exactly it meant by the sutra. So, in this context, my earnest request and clarion call is with regard to what is next in Indology. Let us also try to, first of all, correct the translation part, then offer this thing. And there is certain community which is working for the defense of all the distortion already done, starting from Max Muller onwards. So, this is what actually I wanted to speak out my mind. Maybe with this, I would like to stop here. I thank the organizers, Professor Pandurangiji, Professor Varkhedi, and my friend Dr. Shivani for giving me this opportunity. And my earnest request is, let us try to include these subjects as part of Indological studies. They are not simply a medical science kind of things. Thank you very much.
नमः सभाभ्यः सभापतिभ्यश्च नमो नमः। सम्माननीयाः अध्यक्षमहोदयाः, समुपस्थिताः विद्वांसः, प्रतिभागिनश्च। So, it is a great pleasure for me to have been invited here to present some ideas of mine. And the point on which I have to talk about here, what is next? what should be done in future. Yesterday, Professor Ashok Akluskar had given some ideas what should be the path we should follow. Here again, I am also stressing some issues, some ideas, and I would try to convey some my own ideas, and if I am wrong, I am always open to corrections. So, as we understand, the term Indology includes so many things. It includes history of India. It includes history of Indian philosophy, history of Indian religions, and it also includes whatever we had in past. So that is the way to discover who we are, what is our identity. And this is the problematic thing, that other people are telling us our identities. What our identity is, what our nature is, what our specializations are, what our distinct characters are, what our religions were, all those things are conveyed by some other people. And the point could be raised, what is wrong in it? And I think this is the demand of democracy, that everybody has the right to say what he is willing to. And we cannot make someone shut down his mouth. We could do one thing, and that is our aim, and we should follow the same idea in which we could make a counter position, counter perspective. And how we could make a counter perspective, this is the real challenge. Let us take some points. Do we know ourselves? Do we know the India? Do we know the Indian religions? Do we know the Hinduism? And if one has to answer clearly, surely not, we don't know clearly. Because what we have the tradition. We understand our religions better, it is true. But we couldn't say that this is the same religion we are following, this is the same philosophy which is propagated, would have been there already. Earlier, 2000 years ago, or 3000 years ago, or only 1000 years ago. What was the nature of Hinduism before Acharya Shankara, before Madhvacharya, before Vallabhacharya, before Ramanujacharya? All these issues are very important issues. What we had in past, all those things should be discovered, should be understood. And if we are not going to discover, some other people will try to discover, and they propose it, and we would have to accept. That is happening here. In the time of British period, Sir William Jones started Asiatic Society in Kolkata. Some other studies started, and in that way they tried to understand, and they came with one idea, with one, this is to say, imperial idea that the people who are here, they are not so much cultured. We have to make them cultured. This was one idea. And in that way, many ideas were developed, many ideas were formed. Sir William Jones writes a book on Hinduism. And if you go through that book, you will notice that he is trying to convey that there is only one religion. And all other religions are not actually real religions. So in the light of those ideas, the people here started formulating the idea of Hinduism. So there was an idea of Hinduism formulated by Sir Radhakrishnan. And it was challenged by this same institute, I think, which was related to this Madhvacharya's position, because Radhakrishnan tried to convey that Hinduism is only Advaitism. And there is a counter perspective to this Hinduism which was conveyed by Radhakrishnan. So we will have to discover the nature of our religion, nature of our philosophies, and what we should do and in which way we should go. Because how it should be done, this is the challenge. And here again, we many times point our fingers towards the Marxist thinkers. And we blame that they are not doing justice to our tradition, they are not doing justice to our ideas, they are propounding our theories in a completely distorted way. That might be true some places, but what is the way? Because there must be a clear way where you are free from all prejudices. And being free from all the prejudices, you are coming to a conclusion. So are we trying to do it? And how we could do it? Because when you are studying Hinduism, being a Hindu, and when someone else is studying Hinduism, there must be a point of difference. And those point of differences will always be there. You cannot get away from those differences. But when you are studying Hinduism, there must be a way, there must be a style, there must be a methodology through which you can study, you present your ideas, and you come to some conclusion, some understanding of your tradition. Yesterday there came one idea at one point that we have a clear, we miss the understanding of history. Because here the concept of history which is available here in India and the concept of history which is available in Europe, in Western countries, that is completely different. And surely this is the case. We many times are unable to make a distinction between mythology and history. So that should be done. And if we are not doing, someone else will do. So it is better we should do it. So that is the point. And here there are, if you are talking about philosophical ideas, many times the philosophical ideas are not presented in a clear-cut way, in a formulated way. One issue I would like to share here, because it is related with me and Professor Dayakrishna ji. Professor Dayakrishna wrote a paper, the mapping of qualities in Prasastapada Bhashya. And he made a distinction between two qualities, and he said abstract qualities and concrete qualities. I am not going to blame any point, because I respect his ideas and I very much respect his way of appreciation. So he made a distinction, concrete qualities and abstract qualities. And what is the meaning of concrete qualities? what he found in Prashastapad Bhashya, there was a term Murta Guna and Amurta Guna. Every student of Nyaya clearly understands what Murta Guna means. Because Murta Guna means Murtasya Gunaha, Murta Gunaha. The quality of a Murta. Murta means Parichinna Parimanaman. Or something, a substance which is in motion. Murtatvam Kriyavatvam. But he translates in this way. Because why he translates this way? The point is he is not aware of this. So many a times, many people, the people who are very much engaged in research in Indology, they are very much unaware of these points. Therefore, they are doing it. And when I pointed out, he told me that he made this paper available to Professor D. Prahaladacharya ji. I told him that how could it be possible that you made it available to Prahaladacharya ji and he could not understand. Another issue I am going to raise here. I would not name the person because he is a serving professor in a central university. And he wrote more than 1,000 pages on Gita. And when he had been delivering a lecture on Gita, he told very clearly that there is no concept of rebirth in Gita. Imagine the point. He was so confident. And when I raised my fingers that there are many places, Bahuni me betitani janmani tava charjuna, punasya jatasya dhruva mritru dhruvam janmamritasya. He told me that those things are meant for something else. They don't convey punarjanma, the idea of punarjanma. And later on, after 1 month, he wrote me a very long mail. I didn't reply to that mail because I found that there is no point arguing with that person. Because if writing 1,000 pages, he couldn't come to this conclusion, couldn't understand this point. So there are issues. Sometimes people don't understand and sometimes people try to formulate, try to present the ideas in such a way that these were accepted by modern people. The point, when I inquired a few people, then I discovered that he is trying to present Gita's ideas, Gita's concept of morality in modern world. Modern world means modern world which doesn't believe in Punarjanma, rebirth. Because if you take the development of modern philosophy and modern science, if you go through the history of last 300 years, you will notice very clearly that in Western philosophical tradition, there is no idea of Punarjanma. And secondly, all the issues, all the moral questions, the questions which are related to ethics and morality, those are discussed and tried to answer in the way that there is no Punarjanma at all. And here, yesterday was also there is a discussion on this idea when you are giving something, when you are giving a dan, performing a dan, you are also giving your sins, your papa to that person. So here there is very clear idea that if you are giving, you are also giving your punya, papa, you are acquiring punya. So all these are, there is a redistributive morality. When you are performing, you are going to be awarded or punished. This is the idea. And on this idea, everything is evolved in this Indian philosophical tradition. Except Charvaka. If you leave this Charvaka philosophy, all these philosophies accept this idea of morality. Where when you are performing something, you are going to be awarded or punished. The Buddhist philosophers who don't accept even the concept of Atman, they also believe in this idea of Punarjanma. So what is happening nowadays? What is guiding this academia? The point is that this present ideas, the Marxist ideas, what is Marxist idea? Actually, Marxist ideas are nothing but the modern Charvaka. So this is modern Charvaka view, which doesn't go beyond our perceptual world, because this perceptual world is there. There is nothing beyond it. And in that way, there is another point. They believe in the development of knowledge. The knowledge, there is a development of knowledge. 1000 years ago, which was not known, now it is known. And if you try to understand, try to point out, try to see, you will notice very clearly that within a small fraction of time, we have achieved so many things. We knew so many things which were not available to us, which were not known to us. So this is the direction we are following. And here what is happening in our tradition. Many times we are not aware about our history of thoughts even. If you talk about Nyaya philosophy, I am a student of Nyaya, so I take that point very clearly. If you take the Nyaya point, what is the difference? What are the different points? Udyotakar is saying what are the different points. Akshapad is saying. So all these things, all those issues are not highlighted, are not understood. Many times we are unable to understand those points, notice those points. We understand that the whole philosophy of Nyaya is the simple way, only one way, one philosophy, and there is no point of difference. There is nothing which is objectionable. What Gautam said, nobody rejected. So that is the point. And here what is happening in the tradition of modern thinking, in this way knowledge progresses, where there is rejection. If there are some, because this is the way science develops. Okay? Any problem? A few. So there are issues here. And in the if we follow the Nyaya framework, here everything is taken to be questioned, because for Nyayika nothing is sacred at all. And here the Nyaya framework is very much suitable for doing philosophy, doing research in this area, where you can go on point out what had been done and what to be done in near future. So these are the points, the history of religion, our history of our philosophies, history of our ideas, and all these things should be understood, should be done from a very systematic way. That is the point I would like to raise, because there are there are many, and there was a very famous book, very controversial book also, An Alternative History of Indian Hinduism by Wendy Donier, and those type of books are coming one day and another day, but we the Indians, we are not doing in that way, trying to understand our religion, our history and our ideas. So our ideas, all these things, our Shastras, if you take our Shastras, whatever is there, if you try to say that everything what is achieved by modern science is available in our Shastras, I don't think it will be taken seriously. Nobody will take it seriously. I am saying it because one scholar, very famous scholar of Banaras, once declared in this way that you can find out the theory to make Paramanu, atom bomb in Vedas. So that is these are very big claims, and whenever we are making big claims, we are making ourselves, our positions very ridiculous. So we must be away from making all these types of claims, and we should make a way in which many people are doing research in a very good way, in a systematic way. And that is lacking here. What we do, the status of research is actually, what is the problem here when we are talking about Indology and Bharati Vidyut Parishad? The point is here, this one, that we are lacking in the area of research and the quality of research. So we have to improve the quality of research in all these areas, and only doing this we could justice to our tradition, and in that way only our ideas will flourish. Thank you very much giving me this opportunity.
Thanks to all who have raised very important issues here. And now we have Dr. T. Ganeshan. There is nobody else who is better experiencing the Indology than Ganeshan, because he is in the Indology department of French Institute. And the interactions I had with him in the past, that is also the causes of the birth of the BVP. We have been discussing so many things on the Indology. So I request Dr. Ganeshan to raise few issues, the very important issues. Then if time permits, then I will speak for a few minutes, then Tatacharya will take charge.
Namasabhaye. My pranams to all of you. I sincerely thank Professor Veer Narayanan and the organizers for inviting me and sharing me a few thoughts with you. As he told you, I am working in the French Institute of Pondicherry, which was previously known as French Institute of Indology. In fact, it is here to give a brief introduction about the institute. It was started in the year 1955 when the French left Pondicherry. It is managed by the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, funded by that. And immediately after starting that institute, they launched the program of Indian cultural studies, research in Indian culture, Indian civilization. So Indology, they put the name. And the area they selected was study of religion and religious practices, and the fundamental texts for those, which are the sources for the religious practices. And they have taken the Shaivism, which is so much prevalent, and so they collected manuscripts of the Shaiva Agamas, because Agamas are the basic sources for the religious practices, and started editing it. That is a brief one. My point is the collection of manuscripts and preserving them and editing the text. So this is one example of the French Institute where they have gone to the fundamental sources. So to study, understand and comprehend the Indian civilization, especially the religious and philosophical domain, we have to go to the deeply to the root texts. And as you know, many of the texts are in the manuscript form. And when coming to the religion and philosophy, we have the darshanas, Vedanta, Nyaya, Mimamsa, etc., where many of the texts have been to some extent published and known and studied. The other aspect is the Purana and Agamas. Even in the Puranas, of course, it is a vast resource, and at least some editions have been come out in the course of this 1 century. That is, we can have the 18 Puranas and and still there are, of course, to be much to be done. But the Agama and Tantra is a much less neglected field, and the manuscripts. And throughout our country, our Bharata Desha, we have these Tantra and Agama manuscripts. And as you all know, as we all observe, the actual practice of our modern, the Sanatana Dharma, is more than based on the many times based on the Agamas. The Veda serves as the basis, and the Agama and Tantra are the superstructure. And that to know and to have a correct idea of these Agamic and the religious practices, we have to study the Tantra and Agama. For that, we have to more critical editions and studies have to be undertaken for the Agamic and Tantra studies. For that, the manuscripts have to be collected and preserved. So fortunately, this aspect has been comprehended by the European Indology, especially the French Indology, and he has collected the manuscript. And so my point is to the Indology, without manuscripts, I can say, maybe it is a little bit, but without manuscripts, there is no Indology, we can say. Because only if 50%, we can see, if they say 40 to 50% of the texts have been published so far in all the fields, in Sanskrit and other classical languages. But still, a lot has to be done, much remains to be done, and the manuscript preservation, and not only preservation, critically editing those texts and bringing out them. Because now, if we observe the Western Indological research, especially in Europe, there are now more studies, more students and more researchers, university professors are engaging themselves in the research on Tantra and Agama. And not only in our country, but also in Nepal, there is a vast collection of manuscripts lying in the various archives in Nepal to be explored. And they are doing, the Europeans are now coming in, undertaking this research work. And previously, some 20 years back, because of the manuscripts are written in various lipis unknown to them, they used to engage as Indian Pandits, Indian scholars to copy them. Now, for the past 10 years, I am observing many of the young researchers in Europe, they are fully equipped in reading all the ancient lipis. Unfortunately, our Indian researchers, especially the Sanskrit researchers and postgraduates, many of them do not know various lipis. That is also a very essential one. So, lipic jnana, preservation of manuscripts, critically editing those texts, and especially, now I am restricting myself mainly to the Tantra and Agama, because it is a vast resource and a huge, vast domain field where there is a lot of scope for further research. As my previous speaker, Professor Satyananda Mishra told, if we do not do, then they will start doing. So when they start doing, there is a distortion, especially when we see the interpretation, translation about the religious practices. We see a lot of distortions, and they could not comprehend, because we are the practitioners. Even though we do practice in a very perfunctory way, but still we have the samskara. So we are in a better position to interpret, to comprehend those religious practices, especially the Tantra and Agama. But when the Europeans do, they mostly do it in a philological way, from the theoretical way. So their interpretation goes against the practice and proves to be wrong. So it is our duty. So it is in fact, it is a challenge. So for the modern researchers to take up the study of manuscript preservation and do research in the Tantra and Agama. Whatever Agama, whatever tradition, but Tantra and Agama is a through pan-Indian one. So every region has its own contribution, and this has to be taught by the Indologists, especially Bharatiya Vidvat Parishad members and scholars, and we have to inculcate the importance and the necessity of the manuscript studies to the younger generation, for the future generation. Otherwise, the Europeans will take, and we have to depend upon their interpretation, which should not be a ridiculous situation, which will be a ridiculous situation, and which should not happen. This is my wish. So I think this is my, I wanted to convey, to share with the scholars assembled here. And thank you for your patience hearing. Thank you.
अस्माकम् अध्यक्षानाम् अनुमतिं स्वीकृत्य कियतः निमेषान् दास्यन्ति? 10 निमेषपर्यन्तं. 9:25 I will finish. एकादशवादने समापितव्यम्. यावत् शीघ्रं समापयामि. श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः. The problem we are facing in Indology today is the most lethargic attitude that we have. That is the main cause of our problems. Tatra sarvatrapi vishwavidyaleyeshu chalta hai attitude that should stop. Then only we can improve. Nobody is serious about the research. Nobody wants to have something new topics for research, the PhD research or the later postdoctoral or whatever research. Tatra mama chhatrena, this is myself problem. Ekena uktam tatra sarvadarshan ritya Brahma Tattva Vimarshaha. This is the PhD topic. The Brahma Tattva is discussed already for centuries and millennia, but still we are producing the unnecessary PhD thesis like this. So we have to create a, yesterday it was also mentioned, we have to make some very detailed, the new areas where research has to be done. Something very comprehensive list. Then only there can be some improvement. The improvement should come within. What is happening, the public gets whatever we feed. If we don't feed anything, whatever is available, the public will be satisfied with that thing. We are not writing anything, the Western people are writing. All the Western academic scholars, they are writing on whatever the different various topics. These are published even in India. But whereas we are very lethargic to writing. How many books we are writing per year or per 2 years? This is the question we have to ask ourselves. Then there is a question of language. Most of our scholars, they are facing one language problem. And the compartmentalization of the topics. If a person does MA in Nyaya, he has to pursue his PhD only in Nyaya. Then only he will get the job in Nyaya department. Otherwise, he will be ousted. Nobody will give him PhD because UGC rule is there. So, if he has to write on the Nyaya, he has to take some Krodapatra or whatever. He has to write again in the Sanskrit because the Nyaya is so difficult subject that cannot be clearly expressed in the English or whatever. So whatever the research is done, there will be only 3 persons who see his research. Nobody else sees the research. So then what kind of influence we are going to have on the public, including myself? My Vyutpattivada thesis, nobody has seen except the 3 people who have evaluated it. Because it is in Sanskrit. And Nyaya language, very difficult, terse language. So to get rid of the compartmentalization of the topics, compartmentalization, very subtle, deep compartmentalization should be avoided. We should be writing in English. The Sanskrit became very popular and all Buddhist and Jaina works are available in Sanskrit. Why? Because the Sanskrit was a spoken language, it was the literary language at that time, and everybody wanted to write in Sanskrit. So we have so much vast literature in Sanskrit. But whereas now very few thousands amongst the 125 crore people in India speak or understand Sanskrit properly, then what is the fun of writing Sanskrit thesis? This is one question that is bothering our students and hindering our influence on the society. Whatever is written in the Sanskrit language, so many Sanskrit universities, they have their rules that the students should write thesis in Sanskrit only. And it will be published in Sanskrit. Nobody sees it. Others also, of course, there are many people who are writing thesis in English in other universities, general universities, but somehow they lack the depth compared to the students who are studying in Sanskrit universities. There is no depth, there is no width, there is no communication between the public. This is some of the problems we are facing. And the maintenance of standards in publications, that is also very important. I cannot blame anybody. We have to blame ourselves. That is the problem, my problem. The maintenance of the universities, Sanskrit universities especially, they are becoming ghettos. Many problems are faced by these universities. Very small islands, whatever, become not in communication with the other people. These people are sitting there, 20, 50 people, but they are not in communication with the other people, other department, other disciplines. That is also hindering the progress of this research. So I hope we have to find some ways to deep compartmentalization of the topics and departments, universities. With this I finish, and I request Professor Tatacharya to deliver his address. Here, Professor Tatacharya, he is going to show the project they have done on the Ayurveda manuscripts and other digitalization of the manuscript database, and also well-known figure of the Indology. He will speak on the Indology also. Thanks, sir, once again.
वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। अत्र उपस्थितेभ्यः विद्वद्वरेण्येभ्यः सप्रश्रयं प्रणामाः। इदानीं संस्कृतभाषायां वक्तव्यमिति इच्छा अस्ति, किन्तु म्लेच्छभाषायाम् उच्यते चेत् अतीव समीचीनम् इति वेद्मि। कुत इति चेत् अनेके संस्कृतभाषा अनभिज्ञाः अपि अत्र स्युः इति दृष्ट्या, अतः म्लेच्छभाषामाश्रित्य किञ्चित् वक्तुकामोऽस्मि। क्षन्तव्यः अयं जनः। Friends, I am itching for the last 2 days to say something in this particular audience, because the subject is so close to my heart. For the last 50 years, I have tried to churn the ocean of Indology. Unlike Wendy Doniger and other people who are always getting hala hala, etc., I am trying to get ambrosia from the Amrita Manthana or Samudra Manthana. Before we proceed to churn the ocean, first and foremost thing is, what are our objectives? Are we interested in worldly things, or are we interested in spirituality, philosophy, etc.? I think most of the pundits in the modern world are at crossroads. They can neither give up the facilities of the physical world, nor they can be totally in the spiritual world. Am I right or wrong? And most of the pundits whom I have seen who speak about philosophy, they are too early many a times. So from that point of view, we have to clear two important things. When we are churning the ocean of Indology, are we interested in worldly things, or are we interested in spiritual things? These two things have to be clarified first. From my point of view, I am interested in both, because when you think of your own body, it is a combination of Prakriti, Purusha, and also Paramatma. That's why in Ayurveda we say, Shadvimshakaha Purushaha. 25 Prakriti Tattvas are there in our body, and also the Jivatma is there. And in addition to that, philosophers, Vedantins say there is Paramatma also. Let us accept it as the 27. So when you are thinking of doing some research work in the field of Indology, you can neither give up the Prakriti Mandala, nor you can give up the Adhyatma Kshetra. So from that point of view, we should be able to do research work in both the fields. That's what I am seriously thinking. I think there is one particular scholar present here who did research work on Vaisheshika philosophy, particularly from the point of view of physics. Am I right? So she is here. And Dr. C.S.R. Prabhu has written a book on Vaisheshika philosophy, and he says Vaisheshika physics. There is enormous amount of information in all these texts, and I think India was the first to explore the knowledge possibilities right from 5,000 years. We have got the history from 5,000 years. It may be in the field of food technology, it may be in the field of psychology, it may be in the field of chemistry, or it may be in the field of mathematics, it may be in the field of astronomy. Enormous amount of work has been done. But one important thing which is afflicting us is the Macaulay's education system. Vivekananda, who mentioned about the Macaulay's influence or the impact of Macaulay's education system on India, very clearly stated once, as soon as a student enters into a college, the first thing he learns is his father is a fool. The next thing he learns is his grandfather is an idiot. Nowadays, we mention it in a different way. Oh, there is the generation gap, that's what we call it. From my point of view, this generation gap should not be there, because the realities are the same, whether it is for youngsters or for the elders. That generation gap should not be there. From that point of view, what we are expected to do is the question. As I told you, when I was churning the ocean of Indology, I call it Indian knowledge system rather than Indology. I came to the conclusion there is enormous amount of information which should be useful in the modern context also. Unless you make it relevant to the modern context, it is useless. Nobody will study. Why people do not study Sanskrit? Because even without studying, they can manage themselves and they can eke out their livelihood. Why people do not study Vedanta? Even without studying Vedanta, I can lead a very good life. So from that point of view, what we have to say is, it is very much relevant to your day-to-day life. That's what we have to show. If that is shown, then I think we can do something. From that point of view, I did a lot of research work. For the last 50 years, I am involved and indulging in the churning of Indology. And enormous amount of information was available to me, which is very much useful to the modern world. From that point of view, I want to show this one. I have got 6 volumes like this. This is a software program which I have printed here. That is the detailed bibliography of important manuscripts available on science and technology in India. I have listed about 8,500 palm leaf manuscripts dealing with various topics of science, nearly 40 domains of science. Unfortunately, our own scholars and our own scientists, our own mathematicians have not bothered to look into these manuscripts. I say I have listed only 8,500 manuscripts. According to me, this is the tip of the iceberg only. If I had enough of funds, I would have listed more than 1 lakh manuscripts dealing with science and technology in India, which have not been looked into by any of our scientists and mathematicians. Very important point is, they don't know even the names of these manuscripts. Only the names of the manuscripts are given here, and the metadata of the manuscript is given here. For example, in my program, if you search for the manuscript, manuscripts on anatomy. Then 2 manuscripts are shown there, only 2 I have put there. One is called Shastrachedana Vidya, Sharirachedana Vidya. And this manuscript is available in the manuscript library in Srinagar. And I can give you all the details, where it can be, how you can approach those people, what is the phone number, etc. All the metadata is also given in that software program. So from that point of view, first and foremost thing is, we must assess what exactly is available in India even today, and how many manuscripts are available on sciences, technology, etc., etc. So this is a very important area for working. I told Dr. Pandurangi when he invited me for the talk, I said, most of the people come there, and most of the times what happens, these conferences are held, and as soon as the conference is over, people will forget about it. Will there be any follow-up action? My father used to say, Akashe utpanna shabdaha akashe viliyate. That's what he used to say. So nothing happens. But as soon as the conference is over, we must have some follow-up action and ultimately say, yes, these are the things to be done, focus on certain projects, and ultimately take forward those projects. This is one of such important projects. Nearly 40 domains of science have been studied, and I have listed about 8,500 palm leaf manuscripts which are dealing with these 40 domains of science. Probably we can get more than 1 lakh manuscripts dealing with science and technology only. And another important thing, when we study about the Shastras, and Dr. Nayak is here and also Dr. Govindarajan is here, who are struggling very hard, but they are not recognized anywhere, to understand the perception from the point of view of Indian systems of philosophy. Very interesting thing is, I was mentioning in some other conference, we are depending upon the theory of perception which is advocated by the Greeks. Whatever Plato stated, that theory of perception we have. That theory of perception is called a representation theory. P.N. Srinivasacharya, in one of his works, namely Philosophy of Vishishtadvaita, mentions about perception, the story of perception as told by the Indians, not as told by the Westerners. All of you are so much conversant with the physics. You are conversant with neurosciences and neurolinguistics, etc. From the point of view of physics, how the perception takes place. the image of the object falls on my retina. Then I see the object. This is the story given by the physicist. Then the neurologist comes in and he says, certain electrical impulses are created in your brain, there, and then it will be carried to the brain, and certain neurons are fired in the brain. And then you can see the object. Then the psychologist has to come and he has to say, no, you can't see the original object completely, because when I am seeing this table, I can see only 3 legs, not 4 legs. The mind reconstructs the table again, and according to that, you say the table has 4 legs, and it is having such and such a shape, etc. The other side is not seen by me now. So this is the theory of representation. Just imagine, this particular theory of representation is made use of in fMRI and also PET scan. What happens to you if it is a wrong theory? I am not going into philosophy or anything. On the other hand, from our point of view, what happens? The perception starts from the subject to the object. The consciousness flows through the manas, sense organs, and ultimately reaches those objects, and then it will be shaped in that particular way. Atma manasa sanyujyate, mana indriyena, indriyam arthena, tatah pratyaksha. If this theory is correct, should we design all our instruments like MRI and also PET scan, etc., based on this theory or on the theory of representation, which is piecemeal and which is incomplete? According to Plato and Aristotle, you can never see the original object. You are connected with the image of the object, not with the original object. But from our point of view, your consciousness is connected with the original object and it takes that particular shape. That's why Vachaspati Mishra, in his works, very clearly says, Samvideva hi bhagavati naha vastupagame sharanam. Samvideva hi bhagavati naha vastupagame sharanam. If you want to accept objects in this world, we must have this consciousness. This consciousness flows out and ultimately takes the form of those objects. That's why we have got the direct cognition of the object. According to Plato's theory or the representation theory, you don't have the direct cognition of the object, you have got the direct cognition of the image of the object only. By seeing a photo, can you say, I am seeing the original person here? This is a very important thing to be noted. And I think Chittaranjan Naik and also Govindarajan, both of them are studying this for the last 2 years very seriously. Unfortunately, most of our scholars are not interested in these studies. Probably they will not read what they are writing. He has written several 100 pages with regard to that perception already. So we must be very serious scholars. In those days, it used to be said, Ekasmin janmani ekameva shastram. Now, Dr. Mishraji told us that we have to understand ourselves, understand our own philosophy, etc. So, to understand one particular Shastra, how much time does it require? It requires 60 years or 70 years of rigorous struggle, and you have to study for all the 18 hours. Not 24 hours you can't study, at least 18 hours you have to study. I had seen several people, like Ranganatha Brahmatandra Parakal Swami of Mysore, and so many other scholars, who used to think about the Shastras almost all the time, whenever they are awake. So, eating, etc., some incidental, it becomes gramam gachanna trinam sprishati, just like that. So, such deep involvement is necessary in Indology. I don't call it Indology, I want to call it Indian knowledge systems, which are most valuable. Another important point I want to mention about the worldly things is, when you are looking into these ancient texts, please try to extract all information that is available with regard to science and technology, which will be most useful. Whether you like it or not, our modern religion is, science is the religion. Am I right or wrong? If it is proved by science, you say, oh, it's accepted. If it is not proved by science, you will not accept it. And whatever science is, whether you examine it or not, you simply accept it because it is stated or it is validated by science. I am not saying that our ancient knowledge systems should be validated by means of science only. You can use science also as a medium to understand our ancient knowledge systems, because they need not be validated again, because our great rishis and great sages have validated all those things, not only by means of perception, by means of inference, by means of intuition also. Intuition is a very, very important point when you understand.
One small request, sir. We are churning the Western Indology. Over the tips of Western Indology,
ಹೇಳ ಸರಿ ಆಯಿತು. Okay, okay. And I'll mention that point also, okay. So from that point of view, what are you expect to do? So this is one of the things which I have done. This is Science and Technology in India Through the Ages, which was published by me nearly 5 or 6 in 2004 when I was in the Academy of Sanskrit Research. Dr. Kastur Rangan, who is considered to be one of the greatest scientists of India, he says this is one of the best books I have ever seen. And he also said, I get so much of inspiration from this particular book. And when he was in the ISRO, when he was the chairman of the ISRO, he actually financed this particular project and this book was brought out. So you can go through that leisurely. But my feeling is we should not revel in past glory. Can we do something now? So from that point of view also I have done some sort of research work. According to me, whether it is religion or whether it is philosophy or any text let it be, wherever you touch, you can get some information for research work. One important thing I want to mention. I was studying the works of Ramanuja. One of them is called Nitya Grantha, in which he says how you are expected to worship the God. All the puja vidhanas have been given in detail. In that he says, there are 5 cups kept for offering, Arghya, Padya, Achamaniya, etc. For this Snaniya cup, he says you have to put the vetiver or the lamancha anta karitare in English, Kannadadalli. It's called vetiver. That vetiver has to be put into the water. It gives a fine fragrance to the water, etc. I am working in one of the colleges, namely Venkateshwara Engineering College in Bangalore, as a senior mentor. And we took up some research work on this subject also under the Department of Civil Engineering. We said, what is the effect of vetiver on water? When we studied, very interesting thing that happened was, it will clean the fluoride from water. We artificially introduced 10 units of water, 10 units of fluoride into the water, then pass the water through vetiver, 100 grams of vetiver. Every day we used to pass 10 liters of water through 100 grams. And the fluoride content comes down to 0.5%, but 1.5% is the admissible amount. Is it not a good research work? And now so many people are suffering. Particularly our own politicians, they may not be interested in these things, because if you give small solutions, simple solutions, if they can solve it, they cannot have big projects, you know. Why they want to have big projects, you understand that. I don't want to mention that. It should be several crore project. It may be several rupees project actually. Such research works can also be done. That's what I am telling. There is so much of scope for Indology to do research work, because our predecessors have showered so much of information on you. Because you are flooded with information, you will not be able to do anything because you are in the woods. That's my feeling. Similarly, in the same manner, last time when I met Dr. Pandurangi, I was telling him, when we are actually pronouncing the Vedas or chanting the Vedas, some small drops of saliva will also come out. It is called Brahma Bindu in Manusmriti. Is it really Brahma Bindu? It is sacred actually, that's what they say. Otherwise, when you are actually speaking, if the drops of saliva come out, then it is not considered to be auspicious or it is good. probably what happens, lot of research work has to be done with regard to this also. When you are actually chanting the Vedas, the organization of the sounds are very important. That's why Mimamsakas always advocate Anupurvi Nityatva. It should be studied in that sequence. Okay. Agnimi Ile Purohitam, Yajnasya Deva Mrityujam. You cannot say Yajnasya Deva Mrityujam, Agnimi Ile Purohitam. The same Anupurvi has to be continued. If the same Anupurvi has to be maintained, why? Then can we convert that into signals and see what is the combination, how the wave patterns appear, etc. All these things have to be studied. In addition to that, very important thing to be noted is that everything is permutation and combination of letters only, whether it is Vishnu Sahasranama or Vedas or some text which is written by a Nastika, Charvaka text, let it be. But why this is considered to be sacred and why they are not considered to be sacred? From that point of view, what you have to study is when these sounds are organized in a particular way, the tongue touches the different parts of the vocal organ in your body, in your mouth. So it is actually acupressure given to those parts. Then what happens, certain neurons are fired in your brain, and then there is so much of impact of that on the brain, and you can get rid of so many diseases also. Yesterday, another person from Pune or somebody, he was mentioning about how the hypertension can be removed by chanting certain mantras, etc., etc. So in that way, what sort of acupressure is done while we are chanting these mantras in a specific order, that's a very important thing. There is a lot of scope for research work. And another thing is, while we are doing research, particularly with regard to the efficacy of the mantras, foreigners have done so much of work. For example, Professor Emoto in Japan, he has done a lot of research work. And he has used very simple devices, and he says love before water, and after that he crystallizes that particular water. The crystallization takes place, and the crystal appears to be very beautiful, the formation of the crystal. Then he uses the word hatred. Then water absorbs that, and the crystal is in such a distorted way it is formed, and it is not good. There is so much of disturbance. In that way, crystallography is one of the important subjects to test the efficacy of the mantras on water. They have created 1 lakh databases using crystallography, and unfortunately no Indian is interested in this particular research work because water has got such a remarkable memory. Go to Pondicherry. In Pondicherry they are doing some more research work, that also you can see. They not only give you good water for drinking, pure water for drinking, they also energize it by means of mantras and also by means of music. They play Western music to energize the water, and they also play certain mantras to energize the water. So what happens, the water is more useful, and at the same time it will be helpful to improve your health. And actually all the vibrations come back from water, that can be seen. And all the Brahmins who are associated here, who are assembled here, know about the Udakshanti mantras. Have we tried anything in that? When I chant the Udakshanti mantras, what ions are charged and how the crystal is formed. Have we done any research work? For all these things, ultimately money is very much required. When you go to Government of India or when you go to some other Department of Science and Technology, they look at me like this: oh, you are doing some research work on science. You are having Namam and you are having Yajnaopavitam, etc. What can you do? You are a Sanskrit Pandit. Can you do something? Can we allot 5 crores or 7 crores for you? If it is a research, science research organization, I can give you 1 crore or 10 crores also. That's a big problem. I will not go into those details now. In that way, enormous amount of scope is there to do research work even in worldly things. This is what I wanted to say. Then next thing is, think of philosophy. How many people are doing research work on consciousness in India? Have we not spoken about consciousness for the last several years, several thousand years? And our research work actually starts from the subject to the object, whereas Western research work starts from object to the subject. Slowly they are recognizing, physicists are recognizing the presence of consciousness in particles. So if you see thermodynamics, they say, yes, we see something like consciousness. They were speaking of consciousness was a taboo for physicists, just like for Dr. RAJANGANA, ECG Sudarshan, etc. I organized a conference in which they spoke, and they were very free to speak about consciousness. Yes, we find some consciousness even in the atoms. That's what they said. So we have got enormous amount of information on consciousness, whether it is Nyaya Visheshika system, or the Sankhya Yoga system, or the Uttaramimamsa and Purvamimamsa system. Enormous amount of information is available on consciousness. What research work have we done? Have we designed any experiments? And with regard to Indian psychology, we know nothing. There is enormous amount of information about psychology also. Are we interested in these things? Do we conduct conferences just for the sake of conferences and be done with it? Should we not have follow-up action? Should we not do something? In addition to that, one more thing I wanted to mention, which was reminded by Dr. Pandurangi. There are so many Western people who are indulging in the study of Indology, or who are churning Indology with a different perspective. According to me, because their perspective is not perfect, it is not good, it is not with good intention, they are rewarded by hala hala only, not with ambrosia. That is my feeling anyway. People like Wendy Doniger, recently, yesterday I received some paper about Wendy Doniger, which deals about the Aryan invasion theory, etc., etc. So much of misinterpretation is done. And all those people, all the Westerners, are interested in the time frame of the Vedas, when it was written, who wrote it. According to us, nobody wrote it. And when it was written, it was eternal, so it was not written at any time. Now, when you are taking a banana, when it is a ripe banana, should we discuss about the skin of the banana, or should we actually take the kernel and eat it and enjoy it? That's what I want to say. With regard to this, I want to mention one important point. Bharadwaja Vaimanika Shastra was one of the important subjects, and it was published by G.R. Joshar, who was my maternal uncle. When it was given to Indian Institute of Science, many of the great scientists, who are great, good Sanskrit scholars also, they said this is all nonsense. So it has to be thrown into the gutters, because nobody can use a heavy metal like Padarasam or mercury and fly an aircraft. Go to the internet and find out how many mercury vortex engines have been experimented in the West. Recently, one particular scientist in MIT has done research work, and he has adopted the shape of a particular Vimana, Tripura Vimana or something, and when he moves it through the wind tunnel, he says this is the best model having full aerodynamics. It is done according to aerodynamics. I find it so much useful. So that's why I say, when we go into these texts, these people who are in the Indian Institute of Science, they said, oh, this Bharadwaja Vaimanika Shastra does not belong to 1500th century or something. And it was written by Anekal Subbraya Shastri, as revealed to Anekal Subbraya Shastri. So it is a modern text, so we don't want to go into the details. First, there is so much of prejudice like this. I am not very much bothered about the time frame of any individual text. On the other hand, what it contains is more important for me. From that point of view, can you do something? If it is a valuable information, suppose yesterday somebody has done it, why I should not take it? So the scientists in the Indian Institute of Science were not bothered about these things, and ultimately they discarded it. But particularly in NASA and particularly in Germany, they are trying again and again, and I think they have evolved so many things which are very important. So in that way, when we actually go into the older texts, particularly on different systems of philosophy, an enormous amount of information is available, not only with regard to Prakriti, with regard to Purusha and also Paramatma also. According to me, any scientist, yesterday there was a discussion about that also. Any person cannot do away with science because you have got a physical body. You have to obey all the natural laws as if you want to preserve the physical body. But at the same time, you are endowed with a spiritual thing, namely your consciousness. Can you neglect it? So from that point of view, your Indology can go in both the ways. Indological studies have to be churned, or Indology has to be churned for different purposes, for the physical results and also spiritual results. For spiritual results, one more important point I want to mention. Dr. Mishraji was mentioning about one important point about the misinterpretation of Bhagavad Gita. Long, long ago it has been stated in our Shastras, Bibheti alpashrutad vedaha mamayam pratarishyati. Because we are all alpashrutas in a way. So we should be very careful when we are interpreting older texts. So while we are interpreting, we also require a sort of intuition, otherwise it is impossible. Recently when I was teaching Yamunacharya Stotraratna to somebody, I came across a very important point. Swadayaniha sarvesham trayantartham sudurgraham stotrayamasa yogindraha tam vande yamunahvayam. It is very difficult to interpret the Vedas. In Tamil we say it is marai. It means it conceals everything. It will not give you all the information. This is very important from the point of view of N.T. Doniger and others also, because with a different perspective you have to approach the Upanishads, Brahma Sutras, Bhagavad Gita, etc. Dr. D.V. Gundappa, who was one of the outstanding thinkers of our India and also of Karnataka, he has written a beautiful introduction to Ishavasya Upanishad. Ishavasya Upanishad consists of 18 shlokas only, not more than that. So while you are studying this Ishavasya Upanishad, with what perspective you have to approach that? He mentions about the Western approach also. When you give the text to a particular person, he will go through dictionary, he will split the words, get the meaning of all the words, etc., etc. And then he will say this is the text and how many variations are there, when it might have been written, all these things he will do. But the holistic approach is not there. When we study Ishavasya Upanishad, what will be our feeling? Whether we have Shraddha in that or not. I am not simply dissecting the Ishavasya Upanishad and trying to understand that. On the other hand, with what perspective it has been stated. When we try to understand that, then what happens? We get different results altogether. So he says, with so much of reverence and respect, you have to approach Ishavasya Upanishad. Then the Ishavasya Upanishad will reveal to you so many interesting things which a foreigner cannot find out just because he is depending upon dictionaries. My Acharya used to say, nowadays we have got different types of pandits. Some of them are catalog pandits. Some of them are dictionary pandits. Some of them are pandits of encyclopedia. So that is how they approach. Our approach is totally different. We have got a holistic approach, in what context this has been stated and what they want to communicate ultimately. Words are not very much important. Particularly in Nyaya Shastra, we say the Tatparyartha is more important than the Padapadartha. So from that point of view, can we get more and more information in these ancient Shastras? Definitely we can get it, provided you have Shraddha, you have Bhakti, and at the same time you approach it with a sort of intuition, praying to the great sages and saints who have given us this valuable information. So, in this way, what happens? Enormous amount of work can be done. One or two more points I will mention, and I will show you what I have done so far. I am trying to do one interesting thing. When I am saying I am not scolding, or I am not bringing down the image of Western science, technology, etc., etc. I think they are in the physical field. Particularly Westerners are just like Rakshasas, according to me, or just like Ravana. They can do sadhana very well. By means of sadhana, they can also put everything in proper way. That means their, what is that called? Documentation skills are very, very good. Unfortunately, we don't have such documentation skills because mostly we depend upon intuition. And we belong to Shruti Parampara rather than Lekhana Parampara. Shrauta Parampara we belong. With regard to that, a lot of things have to be stated. So, can we use those things for the development of Indian sciences and in the Indian philosophy, Indian psychology, etc.? That's what I am trying to do. All the sciences and technology should subserve the purpose of Indian sciences and technology and spirituality. This is what I am trying to do. I have used some of the technologies for that particular purpose only. It should subserve the purpose of Indian knowledge systems. That's a very important point. And another important point is, I am also batting for indigenous, eco-friendly, not ego-friendly, science and technology. Indigenous, eco-friendly, cost-effective, simple science and technology. So this book is the result of that only. Because several problems which have been solved by the Westerners can be easily solved by the Easterners in a different manner. One important thing I will mention. I was studying about civil engineering in India. I have prepared several PowerPoint presentations on civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, floriculture, mnemonics, and so many other things. You can see all those things. I don't know whether I will be able to show all those things to you now. It takes nearly several days to go through all those things. Very valuable. Particularly mechanical engineering. People say, oh, did they know all these things? I said, they knew all those things. You don't know that they knew. That's what I want to tell. So from that point of view, what happens? Very simple solutions are given. Suppose you have to write on a stone. Is it not very difficult to carve? They have to have a chisel and hit it, etc. So many things they have to do. Very simple solution they have given. 2 herbs they have identified. Take the juice from those 2 herbs, mix them equally, and then smear it on the stone. It becomes soft. Write it. Next day it becomes hard again. Is this not a simple solution? In that way, several simple solutions are available for many of the modern problems also. When we go through our text. That's why I said about the fluoride removal. Simply lamancha you put or vetiver you put and it will remove. In those days they used to put vetiver into the water and then they drink it. They used to drink it. But now you don't know it is cleaning the fluoride from the water. That's why you are suffering. So in that way, so much of work can be done. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation. If you can go through that, I will come there and also show it to you. Yeah? This one is. Huh? Okay. Okay. ಆಯ್ತು. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು 2 ನಿಮಿಷ ಮುಗಿಸಿ. ಅದು ತೋರಿಸ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ. I am extremely thankful to you for giving me an opportunity. I am also thankful to all the audience because they have listened to my lecture with pin drop silence. My humble request is, try to explore something and you will be amply rewarded. Don't leave it at this. Thank you very much. Namaste.
आचार्येभ्यः प्रीताचार्यमहाभागेभ्यः धन्यवादाः। अहं कोरडा सुब्रह्मण्य महाभागान् सम्प्रार्थये तान् राङ्कवप्रदानेन सम्मानयन्तु इति। अहं वेदिकाम् अलङ्कर्तुं गणेशन् महाभागान् सम्प्रार्थये वेदिकायाम् आगत्य एवमेव अहं सप्रशयं सम्प्रार्थये सच्चिदानन्द मिश्र महाभागान् अपि राङ्कप्रदानेन अहम् अनुरुन्धे च DS अहम् अनुरुन्धे सच्चिदानन्द महाभागान् अपि राङ्कप्रदानेन सभाजयन्तु इति अहं सप्रशयं प्रार्थये आचार्यान् JS प्रसाद महाभागान् अपि राङ्कप्रदानेन सभाजयन्तु इति गणेशन् महाभागेभ्यः अपि राङ्कप्रदानेन सभाजयन्तु इति सप्रशयं प्रार्थये आचार्येभ्यः कोरडा सुब्रह्मण्य महाभागेभ्यः धन्यवादाः।
धन्यवादाः। अद्यतनकार्यक्रमाः इदानीं सपाद एकादश 11:15 to 1 o'clock parallel sessions. So today we have 5 venues. One here itself, Rajangana. Dr. Ganesh Ishwar Bhatt महोदयः अध्यक्षः भवति अत्र। अन्यदेकं व्यासराजमठ, तत्र प्रोफेसर् गणपति भट्ट महोदयः अध्यक्षं वहन्ति। तृतीयं तु गीतामन्दिरं ग्रौण्ड् फ्लोर्, डॉक्टर राजेन्द्र सी जैन अस्ति वा अत्र महोदय? डॉक्टर राजेन्द्र सी जैन महोदयः अध्यक्षं वहति तत्र। चतुर्थं भवति तत्त्वसंशोधनसंसत्, चतुर्थं पञ्चमं च तत्त्वसंशोधनसंसत्। एकत्र प्रोफेसर् गौरी मौल्कर्, I would like to welcome Professor Gauri Maulkar, Vice Chancellor of Chinmaya International Foundation, Chinmaya University. Okay. Fifth venue is Tattva Samshodhana Samsat. Professor Abhijit Joshi अस्ति वा? अध्यक्षः भवति। इदानीम् एकं one important announce is there. 11:15 to 1 o'clock, Professor Srinivasa Varkedi sir wants to take one session, one brainstorming workshop on transformation of institutions of Sanskrit and Indic thought at Geeta Mandiram 2nd floor. Whoever wants to attend can go. Only 30 seats are there. So if you want to go, you please give name, and it will start by 11:15. Punaham 2 to 3 afternoon 2 to 3 special lectures are arranged. Adhyaksha bhavati Professor Navanarayana Bandopadhyaya. Speakers Dr. Raghavendra Acharya Rechuri, Dr. H.K. Katti. Then 3 to 4 open forum. Samskritam Kasya iti atraiva. 4th